Hello, this is Blue Joe Saunders, WBO middleweight champion of the world. Subscribe to Sport and Icons to stay in touch with all the top news. God bless you all.
With the semi-final of the World Boxing Super Series coming up this weekend at super middleweight, we have the WBA Super Champion George Groves going up against the IBO champion Chris EUBANK Jr., a domestic UK dust-up, if you like, over in Manchester. And the boxing world is split down the middle as to who really is going to win this one. A lot of people are having the thoughts that, well, George Groves has the experience. He's been in there with the big fights. He's been through the mind games. He's been through the media attention, all this kind of thing. Chris EUBANK Jr. hasn't. Chris EUBANK Jr. has lost once to Blue Joe Saunders, who at the time took the fight on 6 weeks' notice and was out of shape and unfit, and yet he still lost. George Groves, he's lost 3 times, twice to FROCH. First time very, very dubious, of course, with the referee stepping in too early in a fight that George Groves was well and truly on top, especially after he dropped FROCH in the first round. But that led to a rematch, of course, and it was conclusive with a FROCH knockout win. George Groves then went on and faced Badou Jack again for the WBC title, and he lost on points, and he did get dropped also in that fight as well. And a lot of people will say, well, maybe George Groves won that fight, it should have been a draw, or obviously there's like a lot of people who believe Badou Jack won that fight. So George Groves has never been outdone in any fight. You could probably argue the FROCH rematch, of course, but he's not a horse who's set to pasture. Okay, he's 29 years old. He's still got a few years left in the game, and he's not even close to retirement. But yet people seem to think this is, you know, if he was to lose to Chris EUBANK Jr., that's it, he's done, which I totally disagree with. Anyway, like I said, everybody has an opinion as to how this fight's going to go, and of course, one person who always has an opinion on fights is FROCH. Obviously, he shared the ring with George Groves on 2 occasions, as I've just explained. And FROCH, he wrote a short article here about how he believes the fight's going to go. And of course, he's questioning, while Chris EUBANK Jr. is tough and he has a reputation of being very, very tough, and he says himself that he sparred numerous rounds with Chris EUBANK Jr. and hit him with everything that he's got, and Chris EUBANK Jr. just kept coming forward. But he's wondering if Chris EUBANK Jr. can take the big right hand from George Groves, which is something that a lot of people overlook when they talk about George Groves. They don't talk about his power, they talk about how he's got the best jab in the super middleweight division. Some say even in boxing he's got the best jab. But anyway, this is what FROCH had to say about their upcoming fight. Chris EUBANK Jr. is the favourite, and I've already said that I think he will win. But have I overlooked the fact George Groves is actually a bit of a banger? Trust me, he can punch, and even against a proper super middleweight, he's big. He will also bring a lot of experience and confidence now he's world champion, but I think we're all aware of that. But what happens when and if George gets that right going? Chris EUBANK Jr. has never taken anything like that before. He might suddenly think, geez, I'm not going to be able to swarm with him. Because Groves is actually not just a decent boxer, but one who can punch very hard. So we'll have to wait and see if EUBANK Jr. can take that right hand. I'm sure none of you have forgotten Groves putting me down in the first round in Manchester, but you'll remember round 6. Will Chris EUBANK Jr. be able to cope? I actually believe he will. I know he's hard, a hard kid. I hit him as hard as I could in sparring, but he just looked at me, shrugged, and went at it again. Yes, we're talking about 16-ounce gloves and head guards back then, but the fact that I know Groves can bang, but there is just something about Chris EUBANK Jr. that he won't be stopped. That doesn't mean he can't be beaten though. I know EUBANK Jr. is fitter, but he's not that fit. He doesn't work for every second of every round. He only works in bursts and then needs a breather. Groves could keep him on the end of his jab and tag him with a couple of those big rights with little gloves that EUBANK Jr. has never felt before. No, I'm not changing my mind, and I'm still sticking with EUBANK Jr. winning, but the more I look at it, the more I hear EUBANK Jr. talk, the more I see him on the pads in those short, sharp spurts. But there is a very real chance Groves could prove me wrong. He could just box him on the end of that jab, catch him with that big right when he tries to roll him. If he can stay conservative and cute with his punch economy and leaving EUBANK Jr. wanting, he could easily just nick it. If he can land one of those big shots early on, it's going to push him back, make him realise he can't just do what he wants, and he usually does. I have a feeling that might happen, but I'm not sure it will change my prediction. EUBANK Jr. seems to be one of those fighters that doesn't feel anything, no matter how hard he gets hit. That's Carl Froch's statement. Right, so what he's saying is then a lot of people are very aware of the fact that George Groves is a very, very good jabber, if you like. He's very good at setting up shots. Chris EUBANK Jr., very tough, very durable. But as he said, it's one thing to do it in sparring where you've got head guards on and 16-ounce gloves and all this kind of thing. When you're in the ring, smaller gloves, no head guard, and against somebody who can punch very hard like George Groves, how is Chris EUBANK Jr. going to react? And it's true, if you look at the opponents for Chris EUBANK Jr., he has been hit on a few occasions pretty flush, but Jr. just keeps on coming forward. He's not one of these guys who lays down. He's very confident in himself. He's very sure of himself. Although the last couple of times I've seen Chris EUBANK Jr. talking in the press conferences and on interviews, while he's coming across is very confident, very sure of himself, and I'm sure he is, but he keeps questioning about how George Groves is feeling, what happened in their sparring session, what is George Groves thinking about, what's George Groves this and what's George Groves thinking that. And usually, like I said, I'm no psychologist, but I've seen enough fights and I've lived long enough to know that certain things don't sit right. And for me, I may well be reading that totally wrong, but it does seem to me that Chris EUBANK Jr. is not as confident for this fight as he's trying to appear to be. And especially in previous fights as well, he's always come across as pretty brash and pretty confident. But in this one, he's really talking more about his opponent. So it's unusual for him, but anyway, maybe I'm reading that one totally wrong. So with Carl Froch, he's saying that George Groves can punch very, very hard, and a lot of people are sleeping on that fact. And it's true, he does. He really does. You can see it. Whenever his opponent has like a little bit of confidence, goes in there, George Groves throws the right, and if it connects, then his opponent suddenly adopts a different game plan for a little while. So clearly it hurts, and he is a big puncher. He's not a concussive puncher, that's for sure. He's not the biggest knockout artist in the world. He's not somebody who's a one-punch knockout artist. Chris EUBANK Jr., yes, he's very tough, there's no doubt about it. But of course, he has stepped up to super middleweight. And maybe George Groves is a bit too big for him. Maybe, just maybe. Because George Groves he has to boil down to super middleweight. So on the night, he's going to be much bigger anyway. We can see clearly he's taller. And George Groves is not slow on his feet either. You see a lot of people, they look at Chris EUBANK Jr. and his training sessions where he's punching the bags and the pads at like supersonic speed, where he threw, was it 98 punches in 11 seconds or something crazy like that. But all that does is give you a little bit more endurance, so you could tee off a couple of combinations here and there. At no point is he going to be able to hit George Groves 98 times on the bounce within the 11 seconds. It just doesn't work that way. George Groves is very quick on his feet, and nobody can take it. You know, let's be honest, the referee would step in if Chris EUBANK Jr. was teeing off on him 98 punches within 11 seconds and George Groves just stood there and took it. The referee would step in, so this isn't going to happen. Of course, there are a lot of people worrying about the fact that EUBANK Sr. and Jr., of course, have been talking about maybe the referee should get ready to step in. Shane McGuigan should get ready with his white towel, all this kind of thing. They're trying to play games. But of course, this could backfire on them. If George Groves manages to pin EUBANK Jr. against the ropes or against a corner, then who knows? Maybe the referee's going to step in prematurely then as well. Or maybe not prematurely, we don't know. We do know that George Groves has been there before when the referee has stepped in prematurely. So hopefully this doesn't happen. And whatever happens in this fight, while I have picked George Groves to win this tournament when the tournament first started, and I'm sticking to it pretty much basically because of that, I'm not that confident in my prediction, and I'm quite happy for Chris Eubank Jr. to win this tournament, as I am for Callum Smith as well, and of course George Groves, which would be my pick. So what I don't want to happen is I'm doing a fight review and we're talking about controversy in this fight. The referee stopped it too early, or there was a robbery on the scorecards. Don't want to hear that at all. Really, really don't want to hear that. So whoever wins should get the nod. As in who legitimately wins. If there's a knockout, great. As long as the opponent is going to be okay afterwards, you know. But this is a very interesting fight, and I think Carl Froch is right. A lot of people do sleep on the fact that George Groves is actually a big puncher. He's not just a one-trick pony. He is very technical, we know that. He's not the fastest in the world, but his jab is very, very fast, and his right hand is very, very hard as well. He's very quick on his feet. Again, a lot of people overlook that. But his defense, for me, is better than Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. looks like he's defensively better because of the way that he moves and showboats a little bit with it. But if he tries to showboat against George Groves, George Groves will take full advantage of that. And hopefully Chris Eubank Jr. doesn't do that, because he didn't do it against Yildirim, and look at the performance he put on. That was spectacular. It really was. Say what you like about Yildirim, either way, that was a spectacular win for Chris Eubank Jr. No showboating, straight in there, got the job done. But again, I'm picking George Groves to win this one. But as I said, I'm not confident in my prediction at all. So anyway, drop your thoughts below about what you think of Carl Froch's comments about George Groves. He's underrated with his big punch. Most notably the fact everybody remembers that he did drop Carl Froch in the first round. How many times have you seen Carl Froch on the canvas? Anyway, drop your thoughts below, click that thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you next video.